All right, hello everybody. It is 1 o'clock. Welcome, and today's class is in a webinar format, so that means your camera is off. I can't see you, so I just have to imagine in my mind all the gut, the gut laughs, the belly laughs at my jokes and stuff. So if you think they're really funny, and you can throw me a thumbs up or something like that, but otherwise I can't see you. But you only have to attend to receive your credit. Your time here is being tracked by Trek, and they will issue your credits, usually about a week. So to see a schedule and sign up for other CE classes, I have put a link in the chat already of not only our regional supervisor in Texas, but a link for classes that you can click on it and follow the bouncing ball. Pretty easy stuff. All right, all right, all right. As my friend Matthew McConaughey would say, mold, what you need to know, and how to read some air sample reports. This is really going to be sportacular, in my opinion. See, we're 1 minute into this, and I'm already cracking jokes. So just a heads up, we will be recording this. If you you think the jokes are so funny, you can always come back and review them. It will be available for anyone who wants to reference it later. If you want a copy, to make it really easy on me, if you just put your name and email address in the chat, then it's all in one little place, and I can copy you on it after class is over. This class is good for... Well, my notes say 2 credits, but it's only a 1-hour class, so it might be 1. Maybe somebody messed up on this slide. I'm not sure. Again, it takes Trek about a week to get them out. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to make it any faster. As soon as we're done here, I submit that you attended, verify that you attended, and then they take over from there. You're going to receive an email with an option to leave some feedback about today's class. All feedback and your input, all that stuff is welcome. We are always trying to improve the curriculum, the experience, and our jokes. If you choose not to leave any feedback, that's all right too. You still get all the credit, but again, we appreciate your feedback. So who the heck am I? I'm not Lucas. My name is John Bolton, and I'm going to be your instructor today. I started doing inspections in 1998, and besides a degree in building construction, I picked up a few trophies and certifications along the way. I've completed over 12,000 various inspections throughout my career, and I've helped train and develop many inspectors across the country. How? Because I'm also a national speaker on all things inspection related. I've published many articles and have even written 2 books. I say this stuff not to brag, because there's always somebody smarter than me. I'm just trying to gain some faith. That's it. Maybe I get a little bit of your trust with all that stuff. If you got any questions as we go through, feel free to post them in the chat. I attempt, to monitor the chat, watch my slides, and talk with my hands all at the same time, but sometimes it's kind of hard. You may have to just cut in if I don't see you or acknowledge you. I will hang out at the end too for a little bit. If you got something else to say, I'll be do my best to answer the questions. So these are, just real quick, some of the classes we have coming up. They're always free. They're always worth CEs, and invite your friends. Tell some friends about it. We appreciate it. Again, that link I put in the chat already. What else? I think that was it here. Also, hey, if you want us to come to your office for your office or your team or whatever, we'd be happy to set that up for you. That's where Lucas's name and contact info comes in. Get a hold of him and he will make sure it happens. All right, so before we get rolling, this class is sponsored by TLC Home Inspections. TLC is a local multi-inspector firm servicing Austin, San Antonio, Houston, all the surrounding areas. Here's what you get when you choose TLC as your home inspection partner. We do over 6,000 inspections a year, so we come from a ton of experience. We know you guys work 7 days a week, and that means we are available 7 days a week for you as well. We include industry-leading warranties with every full inspection for protection beyond the inspection. We are also too excited to provide you and your clients with something called HomeBinder. For the client, HomeBinder is one single, simple, and secure online platform for all your home maintenance needs. Clients can store all their home's documents, all their inspection reports, warranty information, repairs, renovations, all that stuff. And then they receive maintenance reminders and appliance recall notifications. With HomeBuyer, they also get a free concierge service, so clients can utilize them to sign up all their utilities and that kind of stuff, helps them out, all those things moving related. The companies that are utilized are all vetted through HomeBinder to make sure that they are, local for each market and they can all be trusted, all that good stuff. All right. Clients do not have to use it. It's simply something completely complimentary from TLC, make everybody's lives a little bit better. For you guys, the agents, HomeBinder brands every message and every reminder that's sent to the client with your information. So you are at the top of mind. It's free marketing for you. Doesn't cost you anything. HomeBinder also provides a repair pricer for deficiencies that are found in the report. Those things are researched again to the specific geographical area so that they're all accurate. This repair thing only goes to you, okay? Doesn't go to the client. So you can utilize it if you want or ignore it if you don't. Doesn't matter. It doesn't cost you anything though. TLC typically delivers their inspection reports within a couple hours of the inspections, assuming all of the technology gods are on our side. You guys understand how that goes. TLC's got over 1,400 five-star reviews online, so we take our client service very seriously, and we back every inspection with a 200% guarantee. What that means is if you are not completely satisfied with the inspection, not only are we going to refund your money, but we're going to pay for and send out the inspector of your choice to redo the inspection. So that helps take away the risk of using us. Here are the few things that separate TLC from everybody else. We do free thermal imaging scan on every inspection we perform. That gives us the ability to help identify things like missing insulation, toilet leaks, roof leaks, overheated breakers, leaky ductwork, and tons of other things that you cannot see with the naked eye. Most of our packages include foundation elevation readings with the inspection. So we help take that guesswork out of the foundation assessment of that house. It gives the client like real data from that house, how that foundation is performing. With most of our packages, irrigation systems included, up to 12 zones. We do in-house termite, in-house swimming pool, septic, and depending on the market, which market you're in, we offer mold and indoor air quality assessments. Oh, and sewer scoping. And I tell you, if you guys haven't seen a sewer scope, oh my gosh, I highly, highly, highly recommend it for every single person, whether you're buying real estate or not. You would be shocked at the things that we find with the camera in the scope. And last, real quick, this is really cool. We are stoked to announce that we offer the option for your clients to do pay at close. High five, right? Cool stuff. All right, now today we're going to define and talk a lot about mold, obviously, and we're going to discuss some of its causes. We're going to touch a little bit on the health side. We'll get into a little bit on the sampling and testing methods, that kind of thing. We're going to review 3 common mold types, right? Now, there's a ton of different mold types, but these are very common mold types. We'll discuss 3 of them in this short presentation. We could spend a whole weekend talking about different mold species, right? So we'll just hit some of the big 3. Then we're going to talk about an air sample report, and we'll break down what that report looks like. And lastly, we will describe the impact of mold on the transaction, the real estate transaction. So what is mold? Mold is the formation of fungal growth, also known as fungus among us. Mold is ubiquitous. It is literally everywhere. Okay. So you cannot get rid of all mold. Okay. Nothing, no environment is mold free. So what we want to try to do then is limit the quantity of mold that is in our environment. Mold will grow in all places where there's food and water. Okay. So common and obvious sources of water are things like leaks, right? But not so obvious sources, just air, right? Air contains what? Humidity, right? And usually high humidity in Texas and Florida, where I'm from. When you get RH, or relative humidity, that reaches 60%, you now have the conditions favorable to mold growth because there's mold food everywhere, right? Drywall, tack strips, carpeting, baseboard, fabrics, leathers. Everybody's pulled those shoes out of the back of the closet come Christmas time that have been there all year, and there's stuff growing on them, right? It's anything that has a cellulose content, all right? A not so obvious food source could be even dust bunnies, believe it or not. This is true. When I do an investigation, I have to look at all potential sources of fungal growth. And so, yes, I look under your refrigerator and behind doors, inside closets, and any other little small spaces that like rarely get cleaned because out of sight, out of mind, right? That would be part of an investigator's job. If that just motivated you to look at your own house, then congratulations, you have completed the first step to a healthier environment. All right, mold is considered a subgroup of the kingdom fungi, right? So it's essentially a fungus. Mold is it's an asexual thing, meaning that it naturally replicates all by itself. In that respect, mold fungi or moldus fungi to that will be around forever. When you're talking about mold, we're talking about very, very small particles. Okay, the particulate is so small you can't see it with your naked eye. Okay, so it's good that mold is asexual, right? But how small is small? Because I know that's what you're thinking. How small is small? Let's take a look. Okay, when I do an assessment, I use a particle counter, and that helps me identify most molds that fall in the 2.5 to 10 micron range. How big is that, you ask? Or I should say, I'm glad you asked, right? Well, here you go. A human hair is 50 to 70 microns. And you can see in this little graphic, things like dust, pollen, and mold, things like that. You can fit a whole bunch of those inside a human hair, and then the 2.5 micron particulate is even smaller than that. You fit a whole bunch of those inside one 10 micron size particle. So extremely tiny, right? So again, mold is naturally present in the indoor and the outdoor environment. Okay, you're going to find that both indoors and outdoors. Mold releases spores that float around on air currents, and where they eventually find the right conditions to start a new family is where they start a new family, right? As long as you have food and you have water. Do you know what naked spores are called? Sporn stars. Come on, that's a good one. So if you have ever seen a mold report, you always see that they take an indoor sample and an outdoor sample, right? We want to compare the two different environments and then look for amplifications of the inside stuff that would indicate a moisture and a food source creating that mold growth on the inside. Does that make sense? Looking for amplifications on the inside outside of what normal conditions are. Okay, mold myths. One myth is that mold only grows on organic surfaces like fabric, paper, and wood, right? I already told you you have to have food and water, food being any cellulose content, right? The reality is mold can grow anywhere that it has the food and the moisture. So it won't necessarily grow on the concrete wall. It doesn't necessarily eat the concrete wall until there's a food source like dust particles. So that's why you might see mold growing on other non-porous type stuff that doesn't have any cellulose content. It's the dust particulates on top. Okay, dust is filled with all kinds of different nutrients. So think about it for a sec. A lot of people have mold growth in their bathrooms, right? And the shower surfaces, that kind of thing. So this is because it uses moisture when there's a lot in the bathroom and airborne particulate in order to what? To proliferate, right? It's not eating and breaking down your ceramic tile. It's eating the stuff that's floating around in the air. The mold color myth is a big one. That's when people attempt to identify mold just based off its color. Kind of racist, if you ask me, right? You probably heard people say that's definitely black mold, all right? The color does not dictate the type of mold, right? Let that sink in. The color does not dictate the type of mold. A lot of molds will present themselves as black, all right? The black mold that you're thinking of isn't always black either. Okay, the infamous black mold that we're talking about here is Stachybotrys. Okay, and we'll go over that in a minute. But the color of the growth is dictated by the food source. Makes sense, right? You are what you eat. You've heard that before. Another myth is once we clean it and the mold is gone, it's gone forever. The reality is it will grow again until the source is removed. So simply, well, put it in this perspective. You have somebody trying to sell their house and they wipe the visual off and yet not address the source. Well, then the growth will come back. Okay. So treating the symptom without addressing the source, things like a plumbing leak, or just even high humidity in the house, that does not treat the source. That just treats the symptom. Okay, kind of like treating the symptoms of a cold, the coughing and the sneezing without killing the virus. Same type of thing. Another big one is everybody always wants to know, what can I clean mold with? If I rub this wall with bleach, is it going to get rid of the mold? How many times have you heard that? Tons, right? And the answer is yes, with an asterisk. Okay. Bleach is a good cleaning product, and you might kill the flower, but you don't kill the root. All right. You will still have growth that has spread through whatever substrate it's on. The roots grow into the drywall or the couch or those nice leather shoes, that kind of thing. Which reminds me, if you ever see a little piece of mold on bread, what do most people do? They rip that little piece off and throw it away, right? In reality, the roots of that mold have grown into that bread. You're not getting rid of it, you're just eating it after that. So anytime you get mold on bread, throw the entire piece away. Perfect subject for lunch time, right? Now, here's the hard truth. Mold is the symptom. Water is the problem, all right? Which is precisely why we conduct investigations to identify all sources of moisture, because they can all contribute to fungal growth and poor air quality. It wouldn't do us any good to go in a house, investigate one area, test one area, and leave. You've got to find the source or sources. Many times I've gone on investigations and people think they have one source and I find 3 or 4 or 5. When there's a water event, you have to act quickly, right? In Texas especially, where it's so freaking humid, right? It only takes 24 to 48 hours for mold to begin to grow. And if you get deep into this stuff, some of these molds actually start growing right away. But I'm not going to focus on minutia stuff right now. So when you sell a condo or a house near the coast, some of these Yankees moving down for the winter, you've got to tell them, don't turn your AC off when you leave to fly back north. All right. They will come back to a fungal forest. Sure, you've probably heard stories before. We hear it all the time. I'm born and raised in Florida, and you'll have people that buy investment property so they can come down here and stay during the winter. And when they go back, they leave that place locked up, AC off, power off, everything for months on end, and then come back. And what do you expect? Right? High humidity and lots of food. It's a fungal forest. So some mold facts. Just like rain, we can't stop it. So what we have to do is manage it. Okay. We manage rain with gutters and proper grading, really good paint jobs, right? We must control the environment that mold is prone to grow in the same way. You have to run your AC in order to dehumidify. Hope that makes total sense. You can't pack your closet full of clothes, close those doors, and expect not to see fungus among us all over those nice shoes in the back, right? High moisture levels, food, stagnant air, you're going to get mold growth. That's going to happen. So we have to learn to manage it. And just because you see a small area of mold, don't ever tell anyone that it's nothing, that it's harmless. It just may be a little more manageable, but all persons do not react the same. Okay, every body is different. That is precisely why you will not find a standard put out by the government that says, if Laura is exposed to this for this long under these conditions, then she'll have these symptoms. It doesn't work like that. There are some known carcinogens, okay, but everything else people react differently to. So besides those known carcinogens, one person might have no reaction to an exposure, like nothing at all, while another one gets violently ill, okay, with the exact same exposure. You're often seeing just the tip of the iceberg when you go in and see a problem, since remember the source is usually concealed, i.e. Rain penetrated the wall from the outside, the plumbing pipes are inside the wall, right? So for those reasons, you may see home inspection reports that read something like, type and extent of visible growth is unknown. Okay, no one is attempting to kill a deal. We're just trying to cover ourselves because you don't know how deep and how far it goes. Nobody will without further destructive investigation. That's all that you can do. Okay, a little destructive investigation in order to quantify, then you can design remediation. All right. So if you ever think you have a problem, you shouldn't just order mold samples. Right? That won't tell you the big picture. You should order an investigation or an assessment to try and get to the root of the problem. If you look at this picture here, and you send a handyman to go in there and cut out the visible, what he is probably going to do, or what he will do, is spread spores throughout. Right? Remember how little they are, 2.5 to 10 microns. Fraction of a hair. And since they're very, very light, they float around. They'll float on air currents. A lot of those are created by your AC system, right? The return pulls in air, goes through the equipment, and distributes it throughout the house. So containment is critical when you're trying to clean up mold. A necessary thing to do is to maintain relatively low humidity, okay, inside your home. Ideally, you want to see humidity level less than 60%, okay? But you have to also be real. We live in the South, and that's not easy to do. But once you get above 60% or above, you have the conditions conducive to mold growth. You have enough moisture in the air for the mold to proliferate, which brings up your AC system. Our HVAC system is the primary mechanism for removing moisture from the air. That's why that little 3/4 inch little white pipe, it's called a condensate line, right? Because the evaporator lowers the air temperature, causing the air to dump the moisture that it was holding, goes in a pan, goes in a pipe, and goes outside. That's why they call it the condensate line. So another thing to do is in any wet areas, like our kitchens and bathrooms, use those exhaust fans, people. When you're done taking a shower, leave the exhaust fan on for a little while. That will do a lot of good at helping to remove high moisture content air. All right. The number one reason for fungal growth in a bathroom is people just don't exhaust that air. And the obvious, if you've got leaks, you have to fix those. When it comes to supply pipe leaks, that's under pressure and it never ever stops. Okay. As opposed to something on the waste side, if there was some type of breach, it only leaks when you flush the toilet, run the shower, run the sink, those kind of things, only when water is introduced to it. So it's intermittent. Okay, so it's a good segue into safe cleaning practices. Clean up and dry affected areas immediately. Okay. If you ever have any type of moisture event, timing is critical. So say the tub overflows or a toilet leaks or anything like that, we want to make sure that we clean up the house and dry it out thoroughly within that first 24 to 48 hours, right? You may even need to pull back carpet and allow fans to blow over that wet area, which helps promote evaporation. However, big asterisk here, never, ever, ever use fans if an area has been wet for a prolonged period of time, or you can actually see visible growth. You're only going to cross-contaminate the adjacent areas when you do that, all right? You also want to scrub any cleanable surfaces with soapy water and a brush. You want to thoroughly clean all hard surfaces with, some kind of water or water and some kind of detergent. Porous materials are a water reservoir, and they will only contribute to higher relative humidity. So those things, unfortunately, have to be removed. All right. And sometimes they have to be discarded. Okay. So that's why you will see remote remediations that pull all the carpet out and throw it away. They cut the drywall up, usually up to 4 feet, because that's where the size of the boards, the sheetrock boards, and get rid of those because those are reservoirs. It's very difficult to pull the water out of those. And the longer it takes, the longer you wait, the more growth that you're going to get. So typically after an event, all porous materials are removed. Now, there are good molds and bad molds, right? Not all mold is bad. So let's talk a little bit about some of the good stuff that mold does for us. Number one, it decays dead plant material. Good reason, right? Or good thing. Plus, there are uses on the commercial side, in foods and in medicines, things like that, which instantly reminds me, what did the bread say to the mold? You're really growing on me. I haven't seen a thumbs up all day. I guess I'm not wooing you with my comedic skills yet. That means I'll have to keep trying and entertaining myself. Of course, molds can be health hazards, causing minor to serious adverse symptoms, right? And it can negatively affect the property value if the problem isn't handled properly. Most retail clients don't want to buy a house that has a mold problem, right? Um, I had a story there. Oh, that's what it was. I remember years ago, we had a regular client, was an investor buying a lot of properties, and what he did on every single property he bought was get a full mold investigation. That was his gimmick on negotiating a better price, right? Because we always found something, and that's what he used to negotiate. Uh, as a seller or a listing agent, you don't want to sell somebody a home that has a mold problem and then open up yourself to litigation either, right? Nowadays, we have the whole social media crucifixions and the bad reputation that comes with that too, right? We want to avoid those kind of things. Thank you. I finally got a haha. Appreciate that, Miss Laura. All right, here are some of the key components for a good Club Med mold ecosystem. All right, 60 to 90 degrees. And yes, always Fahrenheit. Born and raised in America here. We use good old Fahrenheit. So 60 to 90 degrees is the Club Med, what do you call that, slot. Okay. Molds can grow lesser and higher temperatures, but that's like the best right there. And moisture, humidity, any leaks, flooding, anything like that that is a moisture source must be maintained, monitored and maintained. A food source, it needs oxygen, but it does not need light. Okay. That's why so often you go to replace, say, an old kitchen cabinet or even a bathroom cabinet, and you pull it out and there's all kinds of stuff growing underneath it. It's the Club Med slot right there. Temperature, food, water, no one messes with it, but it doesn't need light. And really, there's no competition with mold, right? There's nothing that I've ever heard of anyway that eats mold. We don't have any bugs that eat mold. So it's up to us. So really no meaningful relationships there. And speaking of relationships, do you guys know why the mold broke up with bacteria? There just wasn't enough culture in their relationship. These are good ones you can repeat in all kinds of environments, right? Okay, molds can be allergenic, pathogenic, or toxigenic. Allergenic mold is not normally dangerous in small quantities, but can be a problem for people who are particularly allergic to mold or who have asthma, right? In large quantities, it's more likely to be a problem, especially for those kind of people. Pathogenic molds can cause infections in humans, especially those having compromised immune systems. Elderly, really young kids, things like that. But healthy people can usually resist infection from pathogenic molds. So maybe this might also motivate you to go take a walk, join a gym. Now, toxic molds, little different story. They can present some serious health risks to humans and animals too. Okay. Like if I didn't get your attention with the human thing, I know I got some of your attention with the animals. Molds will produce chemical poisons, what they call mycotoxins. And unlike pathogenic molds, health effects from toxic mold exposure, they can be sometimes just temporary irritations or even more serious long-term illnesses can contribute to, what do you call that? Immunosuppression, all right? Some neurological disorders. That's what everybody thought was my problem, but it was later ruled not. And in some cases, cancer. Now, there's thousands of different types of mold out there, and we might as well just go over those. How about if you give me 3 more hours, I can cover a lot more. Are we good with that? Okay, I don't see anybody protesting, so all right, I got a thumbs up, but I think that was a little older. I'm just kidding, obviously. So y'all know, um, I'm trying my best here, but do you know why molds don't make good comedians? Their jokes are just too cheesy. Since you guys got to get out of here in such a hurry, and we're not having any fun, we'll move on here. Um, Cladosporium. Cladosporium is very common, and it can release mycotoxins. It's often found inside a home, in the carpet, inside upholstery, AC systems, especially. It can be green, black, yellow dots. It can grow in clusters. It can look a lot of different ways. All right. But remember, a lot of molds can look the same. So you don't want to harp on uh, specifics on how each of these look because you can't really tell the difference thank you, Miss Michelle and Miss Christie. You can't really tell the difference with the naked eye. Now, we actually, when we're talking about aspergillus and penicillium, those are lumped together because they look so similar under a microscope. It's very difficult to tell them apart. So anytime you see a mold report, you're going to see them together, okay? Because it's too difficult. You can do that if you have to, but it's going to cost you money, right? So we're not trying to solve a murder case or anything like that here. Aspergillus produces some mycotoxins, and you may have seen reports or people talk about aflatoxin, ochratoxin, and citrinin. Okay, those are known carcinogens. All right, so when you run across those, don't eat them. Now, also, aspergillus doesn't necessarily need a lot of moisture to grow. Like, wow, I know I'm scaring you, right? Aspergillosis is one you'll see growing a lot in places where there's just a little bit of moisture. So it doesn't take a whole lot. So when you turn your AC up even to 80, okay, if that relative humidity starts creeping up to 60, you want to rethink that. Yes, your electric bill is going to get a little higher, but you help avoid propagating fungus among us in your house and then sometimes places you can't see. Stachybotrys, the black mold, right? This is the mold that you hear people talk about, the air quotes, toxic black mold. All right, if anybody likes to watch those history shows, like The Truth Behind the Mummy or The Curse of the Mummy, whatever that was called, where they talk about how everyone goes into these tombs and then everybody dies. That's the reason why. They figured that out later on because there's some very toxic molds growing in those areas. Like who knew, right? Dark and dank spaces left undisturbed for centuries. Who'd have figured? But that was a long time ago too. Back in the day, they actually used to design fireplaces to spill into the living environment because they didn't know about carbon monoxide. So we're just smarter nowadays. That's it. Um, some people that are exposed to these things, they often spend like a significant amount of time. Back to those movies when they're going in these tombs, they're down there spending a lot of time, right, inhaling all those mold spores and trying to live down there for a while. And I get it; it'd probably be pretty exciting if you were an archaeologist, but that's what killed a lot of them is mold spores, right? It's important to know that Stachybotrys doesn't naturally occur inside a home. Hmm. That's right. It doesn't naturally occur inside a home. So when you get a report back that has high stacky on the interior, you know that you have a water problem somewhere. Sometimes you can't see the shower leaking into a wall cavity. Okay. Sometimes it's AC related. A lot of times it's AC related and started because of the ductwork wasn't installed properly. Like it can be a lot of different things. Stacky needs a significant amount of moisture to grow. So that's when you know you have a significant problem when you get a test back with high stacky counts on the interior. All right, the presence of mold, either old or active, all right, can impact your health. Okay, just because it's no longer living, it can still affect your health. Just because mold's dead doesn't mean that the spores can't still affect you. All right. That's why when you have a non-professional cleaning or somebody attempts to do their own remediation, it can actually make things worse and actually cost you a lot more, not less. You're not saving money by trying to do it yourself. Never hire a company that isn't a licensed mold remediation company. You can make it way worse. And I've had that happen to me several times where you get licensed general contractors think they know what they're doing and they don't. They actually make it worse. So we definitely want to make sure that if you ever end up touching an area that has mold growth, that you lick your fingers immediately. Okay. Try not to touch your face or anything else, but clean those fingers really good. Yeah, I need to put on. All right, moving on. Imagine mold and mildew. Uh, the difference between imagine them like um, different types of problem tenants. Okay, mildew is that occasional guest. They show up on the bathroom surfaces. They leave behind some light, powdery, nasty residue. It's usually easy to clean up. Usually a little bit of bleach, and you're fine. Mold, on the other hand, is like the squatter you never invited. They set up shop in damp corners, spreading colorful, nasty patches into walls and into floors. The roots grow into things. It's like mildew's rowdy friend. All right. It can cause structural issues if left alone. It can cause some serious health issues if it's not remediated. So when you're showing properties, keep an eye out for both. Okay, but especially watch for nasty mold things. It's the real troublemaker and can really affect property values. Wouldn't be a bad idea to carry around a mask with you either, would it? Maybe one of your favorite leftover COVID ones. Anything is better than nothing, but when we talk about the health effects of mold exposure, the biggest one is our allergic reactions, right? That's really the most common. It's usually because we inhale those mold spores or we have even just surface contact. In a lot of cases, we get it on our hands and then we rub it in our eyes or pick our nose or whatever. That's how it gets into our bodies. Kind of makes scratching your butt seem desirable, right? Of course, asthma can definitely contribute to the severity of your symptoms. All right, those mold spores can trigger an asthmatic symptoms right away in a lot of people. Now, another health effect of mold is hypersensitivity pneumonitis. Yes, I had to write that one down because I can never remember it. Hypersensitivity pneumonitis. And really, that is something that we see more with remediators, remodelers, and even home inspectors that experience repetitive exposures. All right. Or it could even be something where you didn't know you had a mold problem growing in your bedroom or or wherever, right? And you've had this long-term exposure to it, and it causes this condition, this hypersensitivity pneumonitis. Ask your doctor for more information. But this is a condition that when you're exposed to the airborne particles, it causes your lungs to become inflamed, and then it makes it hard to breathe. What that is. Fancy word. So if Alex Trebek ever asks you, write that one down. Hypersensitivity pneumonitis. If I'm even saying that right. For immunocompromised people, invasive mold finds itself as an opportunistic infection. Okay. From the things I've read, Aspergillus is at the top of the list of these molds, and it takes advantage of weaker persons, right? Myotoxic or microtoxic aspects of mold, like Aspergillus penicillium, or Stachybotrys, or any type of mold like that, these poisons start to attack or infiltrate into our blood, and then it starts to attack our internal systems, right? Generally, it's respiratory stuff, okay? But it can attack other symptoms as well. I'm not trying to play doctor. I'm just trying to enlighten everybody. Now, another thing that we see, especially amongst remediators and remodelers, home inspectors, stuff like that, who are exposed to large amounts of mold all at once, is what they call ODTS. Another one I had to write down because I can never remember. Organic dust toxic syndrome. Organic dust toxic syndrome. And it can be present, or it can cause very, very, very severe like symptoms. Remediators or house flippers, a ton of those, right? If they don't follow PPE protocol, that is gear that you wear to help protect yourself, the form of gloves, goggles, respirators, things like that. They can even end up in the hospital because of bad practices like that. Okay, mold is not biased at all. It will attack anybody and everybody, especially the longer you hang around it. Yes, ma'am, Miss Michelle. We should have no problem taking care of that. She says if she has a tenant complaining about mold, TLC can come out and do an investigation that includes testing. And, it's actually one of my very favorite things to do. I love trying to figure things out. And I personally have been a member of our local real estate investor association for over 20 years. And so I know a lot of people and investors, right? Landlords. And you'll get tenants that are, I'm sick and you're rich syndrome. And they need somebody to come out and find out what the deal is, if it even is a deal. Sometimes, I got to be honest, right? Sometimes it is your fault. You didn't fix the thing that they told you about, the leaky thing, the roof or toilet or whatever it was. Many times, however, it's the tenant's fault. Like they're packing stuff in closets and then wonder why there's mold all over their clothes. And they pull it out and they release spores all over the place. Sometimes it's their fault. So now you know, right? Now, when it comes to our regulations about mold, that I should say there are no published standards that says if, like I mentioned earlier, if I am exposed to this stuff for this long, then that's what's going to happen to me, right? Because every person, every body is different. That which makes me sick might not make you sick, and vice versa. Now, the state and the EPA have recommendations and regulations on how mold remediation is done, but it doesn't have any limits for mold or mold spores. Okay, so that's why it's very, very, very important that a licensed professional is called to handle these kind of scenarios. Now, Texas and TREC are very, very big on home inspection and real estate, right? And one of those reasons is because Texas is very big on consumer protection. And so what they found is that there were a lot of consumers that were being mistreated back in the day, 80s and 90s, that kind of thing, being mistreated when it came to mold issues in their homes. You'd have some contractors that would take money and leave the mold or not clean it properly and just spread it, just cross-contaminate everything. So the TDLR, who regulates all mold work in Texas, created licensure for mold assessors and mold remediators. In case you didn't know. This is an important thing to know. When you talk about mold work, whether it's testing, remediation, consulting, whatever it is, the person who's doing the work has to be licensed in the state of Texas. Right? Has to be licensed by the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Period. What Texas has done is they have set up two different categories of professionals on the inspection side, and that's the mold assessment technician and the mold assessment consultant. Okay, the mold assessment technician and the mold assessment consultant. There are not very many mold consultants in Texas. There's only a handful, but there's quite a few mold technicians, right? Which is a good thing. Mold technicians can go out and they can do the evaluation. They can determine whether or not there is mold, by doing some testing. But at that point, they pass it off to a mold consultant. A mold consultant then creates the protocol that the mold remediation company, who's also licensed, will create their work plan from and do all their work based off of that protocol. At the end, the mold consultant comes back at the very end and does what is called a clearance test, post-remediation verification, PRV. This process was put in place by the TDLR because of the abuse back in the day. Now, if you or your client are hiring an inspection company to do mold assessment or do air sampling, they must be licensed in the state of Texas by the TDLR. If not, they may not have the training or expertise to do it right, and certainly not do it legally. And like I've said a couple times here already, if you don't do it right, you can make it worse. You can make it way worse, especially if you're cross-contaminating multiple areas. Now the price of a real remediation goes way up. Yes, ma'am. We can help you out there. Now, the next thing that always comes up is mold testing necessary. If you go to the EPA website, they have a quote there, and I wrote it down here. They have a quote on there. It says, in most cases, if visible mold growth is present, sampling is unnecessary. Wow, talking myself out of business, right? Mold testing can be very beneficial to help us know if an area has been adequately cleaned, like the PRV, right? You come back after the remediation and post-remediation verification, the clearance test, make sure that it was actually cleaned. So very necessary to sample then, right? Sometimes you need to identify the type of mold that's present. A lot of remediators they want to know that, right? It can also help us know if mold has spread to other areas of the home. You remember the micron things, very, very small, and you can't see it all the time. So often we are testing outside the known area to make sure there hasn't been some cross-contamination. The only way you can do that is do testing. Like I said, some remediators too are going to require it before and after testing to prove that their restoration of the job has actually been done properly. So, although every transaction may be different, sampling can help you as the agent differentiate between speculation and facts. Makes sense that sometimes you just have to prove somebody wrong, right? When we do sample air, or when we do samples, air sampling is one method that we use. If you've ever seen a mold inspection done, you've seen something set up similar to this. There you go. There's a lot of different types of devices out there, okay, but this is just one of them where air is pulled through a little cassette. They call it a spore trap cassette at a specific rate for a specific amount of time, and spores get trapped on a specific area inside that cassette. From that, the lab can then determine, air quotes, how much. Okay. So a lot of people want to know why are testing, assessments, and protocols so expensive, right? I can just go down to Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards, buy a test, few bucks, done, right? First of all, those tests don't tell you how much. Okay, they're just going to prove that something grew on your little petri dish, right? They don't compare your interior environment with your exterior environment, so they can't even tell you if this is normal. It simply tells you that certain spores landed on that plate and grew. That's it. It doesn't tell you anything else. Like, you have no actionable information. Plus, once you've grown a bunch of stuff in the plate, you have to send that out and pay a lab. So it's not just the cheap fee that you bought the stuff with. Now the lab's going to charge you 50, 100, 150 bucks to test your stuff. So you see what I mean? I wouldn't waste my time with those. Put it like this, if a homeowner showed me their little petri dish and asked, what is it? What caused it? Where did it come from? Why they have it, or what they need to do about it, I would have no freaking idea, right? I have to conduct my own assessment. I can't tell anything from that cute little petri dish with pretty colors. Surface sampling is another methodology. The surface sampling doesn't give you, air quotes, how much, but it helps us identify what type of mold and if any is present in the spot that was swiped. Okay, you can use tape lifts as well. They're very similar. You're gathering the physical sample off of the substrate where you can see the stuff growing, or sometimes you can't even see it growing, right? But you're going to take the little sample, it goes in a baggie and it goes to the lab, and the lab is going to look at it under a microscope, and it'll just tell you what it found. There's no way for it to tell you how much, if that makes sense. Now, one of my favorite sections is tools. All right. Now, some of the tools that we use to identify problematic areas, well, number one is going to be infrared camera, right? One of the greatest tools mold inspectors have, and home inspectors. It really helps us to detect those hidden or concealed water issues. Remember, you're not going to know the source all the time. You can't always see it, and it requires something like the infrared camera to find those. Next would be moisture meters. That's going to verify whether or not there's actually high moisture content in the anomaly that you found with the camera. Okay. Another one that I really love is particulate counters. They can be very helpful in the process. That is something that we can use to help identify problematic areas. So you're basically, like the picture here, you're walking through an area, setting it up, and it pulls air across its sensor, and it tells you, it won't tell you that stacky exists or anything like that. What it's going to do is, remember we talked about the 2.5 and the 10 micron? It can tell you if there's a concentration of particles that fall in that size range. If so, then there's a high probability of there being an issue, and you can go further. But that's kind of a quick, easy, doesn't cost you more type of thing. Then, of course, you've got things like borescopes. Some call them snake cameras, right? Things like that. that get into areas that you can't see. You can often take the tiny little camera heads like the size of your pinky and stick it in, say, next to an electrical receptacle, when there's a little gap, or some other type of void in say a pipe penetration, around a pipe penetration, where you can stick it in underneath the kitchen sink and get into the wall. Those cameras, and actually those cameras you guys can buy right now on Amazon, and they're like less than $20. Seriously. Of course, they're not real high end, but it's just a cord, a camera the size of your pinky, and it plugs into your phone. So very cheap and comes in really, really handy. And hey, it's a legit business write-off. Think of the rock star status you get if you pulled one of those out of your purse, right? All right, now we're going to go over a mold sample report here in a minute. If you've ever seen one of these, you know they can look drastically different, and some can be extremely confusing. All right. The report is going to include the sample type and location, the quantity sampled, the laboratory analysis, documentations, and the mold counts, and identifies elevated levels of mold. This is a report that we have from a particular job that we did, and you'll see that we did an outside control sample right here. There we go. And then we did a total of 3 air samples and 2 surface samples. And what you'll notice is that on the surface sample, if you look over to the right here, you'll see where it says we did the left side of the HVAC and the right side of the HVAC. I think this was probably 2 different AC systems, is what I think. That's most likely what it was. But you can see there that we did have mold present. Bam, right? Whereas if you look at the air samples, you'll notice that in bedroom 1, there is no problematic fungi, right? With the other bedrooms, we have problems, and you can actually see a count here. In other words, there's a higher concentration of those listed stuffs right there on the interior than there is in the normal environment outside. Pen asp, or as pen, being the most dangerous as it can produce some bad mycotoxins like we talked about. The report just standalone tells me, something's rotting. Okay, we have a water problem and it's causing things to decay. So that's kind of a synopsis of the mold report and what the mold samples look like. Also included with these reports will be some additional information about the different types of molds that you see. I've blown up the pen asp so you can see that. Here we go. It kind of breaks down a little bit of details about what to expect when it comes to those molds. This lab here, Priority Lab, this makes it really, really easy. It says normal or problem. Super simple. Okay, as we get ready to wrap up here, yeah, I'm right at the very end. We'll talk a little bit about how mold affects our real estate sales, lawsuits, right? Things like lawsuits. The last thing any of us needs is a liability issue over something somebody else did. Okay, price issues. Nobody wants mold in their home. There's not going to be very many retail buyers that are going to be okay with buying a home that has mold and one that hasn't been remediated, right? And mold remediation can be very expensive, right? It's typically a thousands game, not a hundreds game. I've seen some of them, up at $10,000. So if you let mold get out of control, it does have the health risks that can present themselves to potential buyers, to potential owners, and again, like I mentioned, even the pets. So mold doesn't have to be a deal killer, though. It's a two-step process. It's a phone call and a check. That's really all it boils down to, right? So what should a seller do when a mold problem's discovered? Get a licensed professional to look it up. Get a licensed professional to do an independent evaluation. Transfer your liability. It's the name of the game, right? Get things in the proper perspective, all right? Test only when it's necessary, right? And get a protocol for remediating the issue when it's necessary. Then properly remediate the issue and get your PRV, post-remediation verification. Pretty simple. That's the process. And that's all, folks. I really appreciate you guys joining me today. I know it probably seemed like a lot of information thrown at you all at once in a short period of time, but I hope you walk away feeling a little bit more informed about mold. And by all means, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We can always do our best to answer your questions, and I will do that now. So if anybody's got any questions, I'll do my best. You can throw them in the chat or raise your hand, speak out, whatever you want. If you think you've gotten everything and you need to get on with your life, by all means, have an awesome life. I appreciate you being here. But if you want to ask any questions, I'll hang out.
Hi, John. I have a few questions, actually. This is kind of an important topic for me. I started getting myself a little bit educated on this. And just in preparation for this class, I was listening to a guy who's a functional medicine sort of practitioner, John Osberg. And he mentioned, so him being sort of in that field, he bought a brand new home it was his like dream home, brand new home. And after a year, they started getting some health issues, etc. So just long story short, they realized that the stucco, the material of the stucco that was used was sort of porous. And somehow, immediately came in, went through the sheetrock that was sort of penetrating into, the walls and created that sort of a huge mold issue in their home they had to leave the home. And when they left, all the problems started sort of, resuming. So that was something for real estate. Obviously, people think that, we're moving to a brand new home, we're not going to have any mold issue. That could not be further from the truth. And I just, wanted to mention that to you. Another thing that he also mentioned that I was going to ask you is sometimes in the new constructions, they finish basically the AC, the AC and the duct work, and they start running the AC, and then they still have work. I mean, they still have all this like dust and crap work that they do that are being sort of swept into the duct work, and those particles stay, and that's the food that you were just mentioning earlier for this mold. And when I heard that, it really scared the hell out of me. I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, this is insane. God knows what's inside these ducts that are sort of what's growing in there, because most likely not everyone is going to do the right job because they're not knowledgeable in that field. So how are we supposed to handle this as a consumer, as a realtor? I mean, like it's kind of a big deal. How do we figure this out about the dog? Because we can see it. It's not like a visible thing behind your cabinets that you can see.
Yeah, exactly. So the answer is you do your best. You do an investigation to help try to identify. Maybe you find anomalies with the infrared camera and prove moisture content with a moisture meter, right? Sometimes you're going to have to take air tests to determine if there's anything there because you can't see it, right? Sometimes you won't have a choice like that. Now, there is actually a protocol for cleaning AC systems.
Okay.
And when you read it, it's the same exact thing as doing a remediation throughout the house, basically, right? You're going to clean it all, treat it all, and it goes away. But the person to do that work is supposed to be a licensed AC guy. It's not the remediator that's typically doing that. Now, there are companies that can remediate the system, but it only makes sense to me if they don't do the system as well as the distribution side, the ductwork, well, then what's the point? Or if they only do the ductwork and not the system, what's the point? So there are companies that can actually clean, remediate AC systems and ductwork. So.
Okay, I see. Did you have any contacts you could share with us?
Not in your area. I actually live in Florida.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You come here,
Okay.
I got plenty.
Oh, yeah, I know. So, so what I would be looking, so I just call the AC companies and ask for if they have any remediation for sort of the system and the ductwork in general to clean the AC.
Actually, if you get somebody that's a licensed assessor, they're probably going to have contacts, just like you as an agent have your favorite title insurance, trades, inspectors, all that kind of stuff. They'll probably have somebody they work with. I know I've worked with Surf Pro here for over 20 years, and we have a really good relation. He helps
Okay.
answer questions that I don't know because he's a higher level than I am, been doing it for so long. But
Got it. So when you had that test that you put on the board, I saw that the AC was checked. So how do they do that with their laser or whatever? They go towards the duct and sort of the AC duct work, and they figure out the air sample there.
well, as an assessor, you can only do two things: a visual and a sample, right? So
Okay.
what proper protocol is to look at all those things. So you're going to remove the panel covers and look inside. Have the fins been impacted? Sometimes the fins are impacted as a technical term, meaning it's inside the fins and you can't visually see it. But you're going to try to identify anything you can visibly on the blower wheel.
Oh, that's right. So, okay, when it comes out. Okay, got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. One last thing. Sorry, hold on. So I saw you already answered the questions. When you mentioned packing the closet, so we shouldn't be packing too much the closet to let it air out. Is that what you were talking about?
Right. If it's just stagnant air, it just sits there and it can only gain in moisture content. It's not going to lose moisture content. And if
We
you've
don't
got,
have any fan in the closets. I mean, I have a closet. All these walk-in closets are just like a room with no windows and air circulation.
yeah, exactly. I get it. I understand. Just don't pack it too full.
Um, yeah. So I think that's pretty much what I had.
Cool.
Yeah, these are the two, I mean, super important things. It's kind of scary stuff that we see.
It can be, but remember there's a process. Follow the
Yeah.
process, and it's a phone call and a check, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Before anybody jumps to any conclusions. If it's
Mm-hmm.
one small area of visible, it can often just be cleaned. All right. If and of course it can go up to thousands of dollars, but you've got to start with somebody that knows what they're doing, has the proper tools that can help put things in perspective, right?
Yeah.
Help you quantify as much as possible and then come up with a plan. So
Yeah.
don't panic.
When I work with sort of contractors, literally every single of them told me, bathroom contractors or kitchen contractors, that every time they pull the cabinets, they find mold. Like there's like they never goes like, oh my God, it's all clean. It's always mold in there. And they think that 8 to 10 years is like the maximum time you should sort of keep your kitchen cabinets. When people remodel, the thing is like for the next 20 years, but apparently
So
10 years is like the
yeah, so now we have to replace our cabinets and our roof every 10 years, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because behind the cabinets, I mean, if you cook, unless you don't cook, but if you use your kitchen, I mean, you're
Well,
gonna have mold.
you're going to have dust bunnies back there, right? And it's
That
stagnant air. So it's going to be, yeah, those are the conditions conducive to. So just try to keep your overall environment low humidity, keep the temp down so it can actually purge water out of the air and pump it outside is critical. It's, those times you set your thermostat too high or turn it off when you leave, bad things happen.
So living in Florida, I mean, you guys live with humidity. How do you handle this? I mean, like, do you have a dehumidifier at home?
We keep our AC on for sure. And like you mentioned, the better you caulk, seal, and paint, the better the house is going to perform. All cracks leak. I can prove that. I can show you the studies down to 1/64th of an inch, which is like 2 pieces of paper thick. Moisture will migrate through that crack. Once it gets into a wall, now you're into porous stuff. You're into cellulose containing stuff, right? So
Yeah,
it can't get better. A good paint job is critical.
that's right. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. That was excellent.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Laura.
Thank you so much again. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
See you soon. Bye, John. Bye.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye.